Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A little late smile there. I was busy talking to my guest, who is an old friend and a very welcome voice to this program because he represents an area that has been in turmoil, I would say, is the best word. I'm trying to think of a good word to say for Montauk. It certainly has had difficulties in the last few years, and his name, of course, is Jeremy Samuelson, who is the president of CCOM, Concerned Citizens of Montauk, of which I am a member.
Thank you.
I might add, even though I don't live there.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being a member of our organization.
So it is true that since I first came out here in 2002, when I cast my eyes for the first time on Montauk and bemoaned that I did not buy in Montauk because its beauty was so staggering, to last 4th of July, when I fled before the fireworks even came, because it was like crazy, is what a change, what a change. And I know that you guys have been working very hard to deal with so much of what's been happening there. It's become the playground of the Western world, or at least Eastern Long Island.
Yeah,
anyway.
Right. Yeah, so I think a lot of people picked their heads up after July 4th weekend last year in 2015 and asked a really simple question, is this our best selves? And the answer, I think, had to be no. You know, I'll be slightly graphic for a second. You know, we had a series of incidents for our shop last year where we had people clearly inebriated just walk in the front door of our office in the middle of the afternoon on a weekday and think they were somewhere else. We had incidents where we showed up to work and we literally, the first thing, had to go put on a kettle of water to wash the vomit off of the front step. So by any measure, yeah, it was pretty bad. So by any measure, Montauk was out of control last year, and it wasn't something that spontaneously happened. It was the path that we as a community allowed ourselves to go down. And I think we all have to take some responsibility for that. It's really, I think some people probably have more responsibility than others, but you know, not enough of us stood up earlier on before things got that bad and sort of waved the flag and said, okay, you know, is this really who we are? I have to give a lot of credit to all of the agencies at the town level, the police, code enforcement, the town board, who heard the message very clearly after July 4th, 2015, and then spent a year setting about identifying fixes to the problems and then delivering those. And I don't think we're home yet. You know, we still have too much chaos, I'll call it, but it is so much better this year. And I think if there's a moment where we can kind of at least take a quick breath and say, are we on the right path? It's okay for us to say, yes, we're on the right path, but we're not there yet. So there's still work to be done.
Well, I'm glad that at least we have started to make some progress, because it should not be lost. It should not be given up to the revelers of the world. It just is too precious an area and has a lovely, beautiful history to it that is very important for Eastern Long Island.
You know, for me, sorry to interrupt you, but for me, it's kind of like dating. You know, you're probably going to get back what you put out that you're looking for. You know, so if we as a community decide that what we are looking for is to remain a beautiful place, and that we welcome visitors and new residents who buy into that sense of community, that's what we're going to get. And if, by contrast, what we're saying is we really want to be Fort Lauderdale, you know, in the 1990s, give us that, well, then of course that's what we're going to attract. And so how we present ourselves, how we carry ourselves, what we promote within our community is really our advertisement to the outside world. And if we're saying, you know, please come here, but honor and respect our community, realize that this is a uniquely gorgeous place and that we want to always honor that and promote that beauty and make sure we're a sustainable community, if that's the message we're going out with, then I think we'll be far more satisfied with who comes and chooses to engage with us.
Sounds good.
Well, it's work.
Yeah,
Takes a lot
of course
of work.
it is. Of course, it's like everything.
Yeah.
Everything, you know, you get what you put into something,
Sure.
and but we are going to talk a little bit about this particular problem of Fort Pond and what's been happening there. You want to give us some background on that?
Yeah. So, look, all of the drinking water that all of us consume on Long Island, I don't care if you're on a private well or if you're on county water or how you get your drinking water, it all comes from the same place, and that's literally the ground beneath our feet. Yeah. So everything we do on top of the land is eventually going to have an impact on the water that we drink, and all of that water that's in the ground eventually makes its way out into all of the surface waters around us. So whether you live near 3 Mile Harbor or Northwest Harbor or Lake Montauk or Fort Pond, everything we're doing is having either a positive impact or a negative impact on the water that I think is a big reason why so many of us choose to live here.
It is my reason, I can tell you that much. My swimming at Gardeners Bay every day, twice a day, is, I mean, come on. Sometimes I come out of that water, I feel like, you know, I'm so incredibly ecstatic. I won't play the radio on the way home. Right. I just so in love with this water that I get to enjoy. Right.
So what we know now is that the problems that have been reported west of us for years are now also our problems out here. Yes. And the simple reality is that depending on which local water body you're talking about, between 50 and 70% of the nitrogen pollution that's in our water is coming from failing and antiquated septic systems. So why nitrogen? Why do I use that as an example? Think of when you go to the garden shop and you say, I really want my lawn to be pretty and green and full. So they sell you a big bag of nitrogen. And that nitrogen is plant food. That's its primary function in that form. So when we take nitrogen and put it through our waste systems, because that's really what our waste is made of, and it goes through our groundwater and then works its way into our surface water, all we're really doing is putting a bunch of plant food into our local waters. And then what happens? You get these algae blooms, you get red tide, brown tide, blue-green algae, you get all of these horrible things that we know are, you know, bad in their own right for either the animals that we love, like our dogs. You know, they're incredibly susceptible to the harmful effects of blue-green algae, but it's also bad for us. It's bad for the fish. It's bad for the complex plant and animal communities that live in these waters. So we are in danger of loving our waters to death. So we at CCOM have been actually testing water from not only Lake Montauk and Fort Pond, but also on the ocean side and a couple of spots in Amagansett, and our partners at Surfrider have carried this as far west as Montauks. And so we go out on a weekly basis, we collect samples, and we run them through a series of tests in a very modest lab that we have in our office. And we're really trying to answer the simple question, is it safe for me to go in the water? And sadly, the answer out here is not always yes. So the easiest example to get people to understand what happens when we fail to take care of our local resources is South Lake, which is the southern end of Lake Montauk. For years, generations used that public bathing beach that had a lifeguard and a bathroom and parking as a wonderful place to take kids. You know, it was sheltered, there weren't big waves, you know, the difference between high tide and low tide was pretty modest, and you could sit in the lawn chair and watch your kids splash around, and that was perfect. Generations
nice
of
bottom
people,
to it, no, you know, all that.
Yeah, exactly. It was idyllic. And generations of people in Montauk learned to swim at that spot. So unfortunately, back in 2005 or 2006, the county health department, which has to come and collect their own water samples.
I've met that man.
There you go. So, you know, he comes at least once a year. You know, we wish he would come more. But they just, at the county level, got so frustrated with this certified bathing beach being closed so often that they said, we're not even going to test here anymore. It's so broken they actually withdrew the certification for that as a bathing beach. So what that means is the town was no longer able to post a lifeguard there because they couldn't ensure that the water quality was clean enough. So long story short, we over decades and decades made poor management decisions that just allowed this compounded effect of pollution to allow us to be run off of the beach, basically. So we ended up doing water testing now. We're in our 4th year, and we had a goal of saying if we could get all of us to understand why this problem exists, then we can begin down this road of doing the simple management things that allow us to clean up this problem. It took us decades to get into it. I hope it doesn't take us that long to get out of it. But we decided that education and engaging with the community in a way that got them to understand the problem was the perfect first step. So we created a program called Save the Lake, Save the Pond. And what we do is...
I like the name.
We frankly tried to come up with something better, but we couldn't. So it was always a placeholder name, and then finally we just said, I guess that's the name. Nobody's proposed anything better, so fine. Just say what you're doing. Well, we're trying to save the lake, we're trying to save the pond. Okay, there it is. So we spent the winter this year thinking about how do we go out, how do we communicate, what actions do we want people to take. So we trained a series of volunteers that will go to people's property for free, and they'll do a walk around, and they'll ask some hopefully pretty simple questions. Do you know you have a septic system? Do you know where it is on your property? Have you ever had a contractor that's qualified and competent come out and take a look at the system to ensure that it's functioning properly? That's sort of meeting number one. And we begin a dialogue with folks. A big percentage of our population has come here from other places where they have sewers. And so when your waste goes away from your property, it's taken care of, it's treated, and that's that. And we said, okay, a lot of people just don't even know they own one of these things. So what if we started there and said, do you know that you have one of these? And almost inevitably, unless somebody grew up here or has a particular interest in this, they don't know that one of these things is on their property. They don't know where it is. They don't know that they're supposed to take care of it the same way you would the boiler in your basement. We said, okay, that's a great place to start the conversation because there's a relationship between this buried infrastructure and the quality of our water. So we try to get people to understand they own one, understand how it works, encourage them to benefit from some of the discounts that we've arranged with local contractors who will come out and take a look at these things, and get it pumped out and inspected. And if you're getting good news at the end of this conversation, then that's fantastic. You've done the right thing and you now have more information. If you get bad news at the end of this, your system isn't working properly, you need to do some maintenance, or it's time for an upgrade to your system, we're trying to get people to be aware that there's actually a very important ballot referendum that's on this November in the form of...
I can't wait.
I hope we wake up the morning after and know that there's now funding in place for water quality. But just for the viewers who may not know as much,
yes,
there's, we've had this Community Preservation Fund since 1998. Across the 5 East End towns, it's raised over $1 billion. I think it's close to $1.5 billion now. Tens of thousands of acres have been preserved. This is an amazing program, no matter how you look at it.
And the way that fund works is that every time a piece of property is sold, there's a 2% tax that goes into the CPF fund.
Exactly.
So every one of us have a stake in this fund. We've all contributed to it if we own out here.
Pretty much, yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Unless you were bought before that, before it started.
Exactly. So now, after almost 20 years of this program, we have the sad reality that just buying land hasn't done everything we need it to protect our drinking water and our surface waters. So some folks in Albany, Fred Thiel, Ken Laval, working with folks at Nature Conservancy and other organizations said, what if we actually took 20% of this money and we earmarked it specifically for water quality improvement projects? So there's a piece of legislation that passed at the state level that allows us to have a ballot referendum in November. And if we can get this ballot referendum passed, then up to 20% of this money on an annual basis will be available for spending by the town on a very specific list of water quality improvement projects that the town is putting together now. There was actually a presentation to the town board earlier this week from the excellent folks in the town Natural Resources Department who went in and said, look, if this thing passes, here's the law that we would now have on the books, here's the type of very specific list of projects that we could spend this on. And a big part of that is looking at people's septic systems And do they need some financial assistance, just as we did with the fuel tanks years ago?
Right.
It's the same kind of idea.
Yes.
You've got one of these things, it's buried on your property. It's time for us to take a look at this and give you some funding as a property owner that would allow you to not be sort of behind the 8 ball when it comes to actually paying for the upgrade. So they're working through details now. It's all subject to public hearing. I would encourage everyone to be aware of this program. But when we were thinking about our idea for Save the Lake, Save the Pond over the winter, we had a real concern that this ballot referendum might happen and people didn't know that it was out there. And we said, well, what if we spent the time between now and then letting people know that you own one of these things, it really matters how you take care of it, and by the way, with your vote, you can have a huge impact on actually providing a funding stream that will clean up some of these systems come 2017. So. Yeah.
Well, there is only one question I have to this.
Okay.
Has the County Board of Health come up with a system that does not cost $20,000 that does mitigate nitrogen?
Right.
So, by the way, in case you don't know where nitrogen comes from, it comes from your urine. That's called nitrogenous waste. That's biology 101.
Yeah.
And that's also phosphorus. And then there's something called VOX, which is volatile organic compounds as well. So those are the three things that we really, but it's the nitrogen that is the culprit in, as you said, of fostering the growth of the algal blooms.
Exactly. Exactly. And fish kills and all kinds of other
yes.
stuff.
Oh my
that
God,
comes along
that
with
fish
it.
kill that we had, was that a year ago, 2015,
yeah.
where the fish were knee deep,
yeah.
dead?
Right. Up in Flanders Bay.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Right. So you had a question, I can't remember what.
Well, my question is, has the county come up with something that works to do this that we can afford?
Right. So yes and no. So the county is finally doing a full court press to update its codes and its list of systems that are approved to actually treat nitrogen on people's properties. So, you know, the thinking for the last several decades has been that it's impossible, it's expensive, we're never going to solve this problem of nitrogen because solving it on a lot-by-lot basis isn't feasible, so we're either going to do nothing or we're going to have to sewer all of Suffolk County. And that has a whole, in addition to cost, billions and billions and billions, in addition to that problem, you always have the concern that, well, if we take away this idea that we're going to manage septic on a property-by-property basis, then we're off to the races with just development on top of development. So the county has finally, after trying to hide from this problem for several decades, and the county executive gets credit here, Steve Ballone, he said, you know what, I get it. It's a problem. We're going to throw as much resources as needed at this problem. And so they have spent about the last 24 months really trying to make some headway here. But steering this huge ship after almost a century of bad policy in Suffolk County has not been an easy task. And I give them credit to the extent that they're on the cusp of coming up with a list of approved systems that will actually be available to homeowners. But you're asking a more specific question about cost. And there's good news, bad news here. The bad news is that there will be a list of expensive technologies that somebody who is able to or is compelled to could basically buy from that list and say, okay, I like this system, I want to do that. That's the bad news, is that those things cost real money, and it's in the neighborhood of what you're talking about, $20,000. So how do you get to a reality where $20,000 is doable for people? Well, one way is you offer them some financial assistance. The other way is, guess what? If you're building a $2 million home, it might be okay for 1% of that money to go into the septic system on your property. Yeah, I would say yes. So that's one way that you can solve this problem. But the good news here is that there's actually a very simple technology that is basically a gravity-fed system that doesn't drop our waste into a deep hole, but it rather spreads it out over a tile field, which is much closer to the surface. So that's a series of pipes that take this waste, and after the solids are left off into a tank, then the liquids flow out into a series of pipes that are close enough to the surface that all of the root material from lawn, trees, gardens can actually benefit from all of that nitrogen that is now close enough to the surface that they can access it through their root system. So, there is a technological set of fixes here that are being contemplated and hopefully will be approved within the next several months. But there's also very simple, I hesitate to even call it technology, that's being used in places like Rhode Island and Maryland and Arkansas, of all places. The technology that we... Yeah, so the technology that we use in Suffolk County is Roman-era technology. It's a hole in the ground. That's all it is. And the folks in Arkansas took a look at this going back almost 50 years and said, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's do something better. When you're 50 years behind the curve, behind Arkansas, who got its act together on treating their waste, you probably need to take a look in the mirror and say, are we really doing the best we can? So, apologies to Arkansas, but, they're not on the cutting edge of environmentalism. And, so if we're 50 years behind them when it comes to handling our septic waste, and all we have to do is change the rules so that people can use these drain fields rather than a hole in the ground, let's do that. I don't know why we wouldn't.
Gosh, that sounds terrific. That sounds like a real, particularly someone like me, because I do have preserve around me. I have a lot of open space, where that kind of thing really would work very well. As a matter of fact, I think that's the kind of thing that Pio Lombardo has told me that I could use, because I am concerned, and I have done nothing because I've been waiting for the county to come up with something that will work.
There's a sad irony, which is that, well-meaning people who might have no problem, actually paying for an upgrade, they haven't had the legal ability to go get something that's better because the county just wasn't there yet. And they're finally dragging themselves to the destination that we need, which is better codes and the ability to actually approve these things on a timely basis. They're getting there. They never get there as fast as we would like, but they're getting there.
And also, I think it's also important that people also realize that the products that they use are very important as well. I drive by a beautiful lawn, and you know what I say? I say, jerk. I really do. I really do, because a beautiful lawn is worthless in my... If you can't drink your water, what the heck does a lawn matter?
Right.
Right. And if you cut crabgrass short, it looks great. Yeah. It's no big deal. This obsession with lawns drives me out of my mind. I cannot understand why where this all comes from. But I guess this is part of what you're talking about, which is the education.
Well, I give people a very simple example. I say, look, okay, there's a product. It could be paint. It could be turpentine. It could be lawn fertilizer, whatever. If you wouldn't put that in a bucket, go down to the ocean and throw it in the ocean, then you shouldn't be putting it either down your drain or on your lawn. That should be the very simple test. And
good. Now, that's a wonderful idea.
Well, that's where it's going to go eventually anyway.
Yeah.
So why would you, sort of pretend that, well, if I put it down the drain and that's how it gets there, I'm okay with it? We shouldn't be okay with it. We should hold ourselves to a higher standard.
Gosh, well, that's an absolutely great way of thinking about things. About, I am, you are creating a lot of guilt in me because I'm so concerned about water. Right. Not only the water that I swim in, which I, as I said, I adore. To go in the water, the other night, and at 7 o'clock, I could see my nail polish on my toes. So gorgeous. Yeah. But I'm also so concerned about everything I do. We use no fertilizers except compost, and we have a garden with vegetables and stuff like that. I use nothing ever, and I pay for whatever little bit of insect control I do with organic guys who are telling me, what is it? I say, it's chrysanthemum leaves and garlic oil. I'm so careful about all that kind of stuff, but yet, I'm still not doing enough.
Yeah.
I'm still not doing enough, and we all have to be more aware that we have to protect this place.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, somebody asked me recently, okay, you say you're an environmentalist. What's that mean? And I said, I thought about it for a minute. I said, okay. Here's my answer. Environmentalism, in my mind, is the simple notion that our air and our water and our land shouldn't be killing us because of what we're doing to it.
I'm going to give you a couple of facts.
Okay.
First of all, we have the worst water quality in New York, worst air quality in New York State, in case you didn't know that. That comes from not only our cars, but our electrical system, all of that. Then if you take Nassau, Suffolk, and Queens and put them together, we are the third densest country in the world.
Right.
So maybe it's also time to say, don't come here. I mean, I don't know what to do. It's like, folks, we got to save this place. It's just too. I came here when I was about 5 to Jamesport on the North Fork, when it was nothing but farms, and I really get so upset because I treasure this place so much, and I want to see it last. As do you, as do all of us, including those wonderful concerned citizens of Montauk.
Hopefully, yeah. Well,
Come back again, Jeremy, because we really do need to hear from people like you.
Always a pleasure.
You hear that, guys? We got to take care of this place. I mean, that's it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Everything you put in your drain. I'm glad you